May mercy, grace, and peace be yours in abundance through God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. We live in an age where, in order to cope, we have to screen out a lot of stimuli. This includes hundreds of people we pass by every day. We shelter ourselves and look down at our smartphones. But there we have to screen and screen out more stimuli, right? Because there's hundreds of communications pouring through. Countless of channels of communication. Well, you know, you can't greet everybody that passes by you. You can't answer all the pleas for help. You can't buy all the stuff pushed your way. You have to ignore a lot. So what do you choose to ignore? Though we can't humanly pay attention to everything, Barbara Brown Taylor says, even so, don't send everything into your spam file. She urges us to live each day with an attentive spirit. Pay attention, she says, with reverence to what's around you. Her book, An Altar in the World, A Geography of Faith, is meant to move us with our faith to see all of God's world as worship space, to see it all as holy ground. Like that idea from our Bible story today about God meeting Moses in the wilderness and telling him to take off his shoes because Moses, you're standing here on holy ground. Now that was just one spot. Our assisting minister, Chad Thomas, says he's been there. He's climbed Mount Sinai. But that was just one spot, and fairly itty-bitty when you think about the whole world. And now we're going to talk about expanding this idea greatly to all the world and all the people standing on it. Paul Woodruff is a professor of philosophy at the University of Texas, Austin, and he said that reverence, paying attention with reverence, is a virtue that keeps people from thinking about themselves and acting like their own gods. Think about reverence. Reverence is coming up close to something a lot bigger than yourself. Something you can't control. Something beyond your creation. Something that transcends your understanding. Well, God certainly meets that criteria. But you might also add to the list looking up at a night sky at the Milky Way. Or contemplating ideals like truth and freedom. Barbara Brown Taylor says paying attention with reverence is a spiritual practice we need to practice. Now, reverence for nature comes easily for most people. Jim and I were hiking in the Cascade River State Park on Monday at the top of Lookout Mountain. Jim found a spot on a rock ledge with a great perspective at the first changing colors of autumn leaves. I don't know if we've got that picture. I will. Keep talking. And of course, we found time to walk on a new beach. It was Flood Bay for any of you that have been there. And I found a rock there that really did fill me with awe. And I just stopped and I picked it up and I was looking at it, and I really was filled with reverence, thinking about the eons that it must have taken for the geological processes of Earth to create this bespeckled beauty. I was thinking about, how it took millions of years to make it to this beach. So how could I take it away? And then I put it in my pocket. Whoops, it's still here. I'll tell you what, for all of my attentiveness, there was a lady that beat me hands down. Jim and I were walking on that paved path towards the Gooseberry Falls Visitor Center, Ahead of us were a couple retiree couples, but one gal had kind of turned aside to scoop something off the path, and I heard her friend turn around and say, "What are you doing?" And for fun, I didn't really know, for fun, I shouted ahead, "Save it, save it!" I thought maybe she was saving a caterpillar, right? But it turned out she was saving a slug. Cue the slug slide. Who would save a slug? Not my husband Jim. The slug saving moment prompted a shudder from him as he remembered camping with his brothers as boys out in their backyard, and their tent was kind of pitched near a wood pile. When they woke up the next morning, slugs had crawled into all of their Coleman sleeping bags. Yuck! And yet, we share this place on earth with all creatures, great and small, and some slimy ones. To see a slug, to pay attention with reverence, to save it from getting squashed under the boot of some inattentive thug. To save a slug from a thug. Well, that lady has holy ground perspective, doesn't she? So we have this Bible story about a man named Moses who turned aside one day to see a wondrous thing, a burning bush that wouldn't burn up. You know, Moses was hiding out there in the Arabian desert to beat a murder rap back in Egypt. He ran across the whole desert to the land of Midian. And there he found work tending the flocks of his father-in-law, Jethro. When Moses turned aside to see this thing, God dismissed the angel and spoke directly to him. "Moses, be reverent, take your shoes off. You're standing on holy ground." It was their meeting space, a place to pay attention with reverence. And the same is true for all of our meeting places as we walk through our lives. That's a lot of real estate. Barbara Brown Taylor practiced this practice as she rode on a subway, and she writes, "I look at the girl with the fussy baby, the guy with the house paint all over his jeans, the couple holding hands, the teenager keeping time with both knees while he listens to music so loud it leaks out of his headphones. Every one of these people has come from somewhere and is going somewhere, the same as I am coming from somewhere and going somewhere. As I sit and think, I am the center of my subway scene and they are on the edges. And in the same way, they are sitting in the center of their own subway scenes and I'm on their edge. Everyone is dealing with something, just like I am. Sometimes I say the Lord's Prayer under my breath. Paying attention to these people has shifted my equilibrium, she writes. For all I know, one of them is practicing reverence on me. When we practice paying attention with reverence, we will see each other differently. We'll learn to pay attention like God does. Julian of Norwich, a 14th century English visionary, was 30 years old when she became mortally ill. The priest came and gave her last rites and held a cross before her to comfort her. In that moment, she saw a vision of Jesus, his face bloodied from the crown of thorns on his head. And she saw something placed in her hands. She looked down and it was circular, the size, something just the size of a hazelnut, and she asked, "What can this be?" God answered her, "Everything which is made. I made it all, I preserve it all." Julian recovered. For 15 years, she kept asking God to explain this vision more, and finally the answer came. I want you to know my love. By looking at this, all of creation, everything God made, and how God loved it, she learned how God loved her. By paying attention to it, she learned how God paid attention to her. Holding it, she learned how God held her. And that is freeing. It was for Moses, and it is for each of us. To go out into this world and be who God means us to be and do what God means us to do. Knowing this is what freed Moses, God said, I will be with you. God's same love and promise is with us. Instead of being consumed with so much stuff, so much information overload, so many people, be our prayer that God would consume us. His love, His light, His fire, His presence, and teach us to walk barefoot across this earth, remembering each step is holy ground.